The day I went to Harbor City, Willow unexpectedly got engaged to someone else. Everyone thought I would rush back to Beijing that night and cause a scene at the engagement party. However, they didn't know that I neither planned to go back nor make a fuss, because nobody expected that before going to Harbor City, I had already happily gotten engaged to someone else. From then on, you go your way, I'll cross my bridge. We don't need to think about seeing each other anymore. Chapter 1. The last time I confessed to Willow, I made quite a fool of myself. There were many people sitting in the private room, but it was dead silent. Not a single person spoke. Minutes passed, and it was Makoto who finally stood up to break the tension. "George, you're Willow's brother. Isn't this inappropriate?" A thug in the corner snickered. "What's inappropriate? Orphan with different fathers and mothers." Laughter erupted, gradually becoming a chorus. I glanced at Willow, who was covering her mouth and laughing so hard she was shaking. Gritting my teeth, I yanked the guy who called me an orphan up by his collar and punched him in the nose. The next second, Willow shouted, "George, stop. Do you want me to say something even more hurtful?" She frowned, stood up, and looked at me, saying, "I've clearly rejected you many times before. Why do you keep pestering me?" I pushed the guy away, forced a smile, and asked, "Rejected me? So when I started dating someone, why did you throw a fit and cry?" She replied, "That's because you're my brother, Liu family's adopted son. If you randomly marry some random person, it'll make it hard for my parents." I laughed and said, "What about that kiss on my 20th birthday?" Willow looked into my eyes with a hint of disdain. She said, "George, I was drunk that night. My mind was all over the place. You don't really think that kissing you means I like you, do you?" I pinched my brow and said in a low voice, "Willow, you've had 4 boyfriends behind my back, but each time, I taught them a lesson, and you immediately broke up with them." I pressed on, "And then you acted all cute, saying you wouldn't do that again." "Why?" She replied, "That's because I hadn't met someone I truly liked." As she said this, she nestled into Makoto's arms, saying, "George, listen clearly. This is the last time I'll say it. I like Makoto, and I'm marrying him. Your previous tactics won't work this time," she added. Makoto looked smug and affectionately gazed at her, saying, "Willow." Without hesitation, she stood on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. Makoto held the back of her head, responding more passionately. They kissed passionately, oblivious to everyone around them. At that moment, I recalled that kiss from my 20th birthday. It was just as intense and lingering, leading me to dream for 4 years without waking up, blindly believing that she liked me. Chapter 2. Willow moved out of the Liu family's old house and started living with Makoto. On the day she moved out, I was busy with my graduation defense at school. Choosing such a day was probably to prevent me from causing trouble for Makoto. However, this time, I didn't feel the rage I usually did. After a brief moment of displeasure, I quickly shook my head and put it all behind me. That evening, I had a graduation dinner with some close classmates. Yet, even though I didn't go looking for him, he came looking for me. On my way to the restroom, I ran into Makoto. He said to me, "George, Willow is here too. Are you going to see her?" I shook my head. "I'm with my classmates, so I won't go." Suddenly, Makoto leaned closer and said, "George, I advise you not to meddle. If you speak ill of me in front of Liu's parents, I'll make sure you regret it." I pushed him away with a smile. "Mr. E, if you hadn't said anything, I wouldn't have thought of it. Since you've brought it up, if I don't speak ill of you, doesn't that mean you wasted your breath?" A flicker of fear crossed his eyes. I continued to mock him. "I heard your dad has spent a few years in prison for extortion. Have you told Willow about that? I should remind Uncle and Auntie." In the next moment, Makoto punched my left shoulder, but I didn't dodge. I quickly kicked his knee, and he let out a yelp of pain and knelt down. That was when I realized my left shoulder was throbbing. Upon closer inspection, I saw he had been holding a key that had dug into me. Rage surged within me. I wanted nothing more than to drag him into the restroom and teach him a lesson. But the next second, a sharp voice rang out, "George, what are you doing?" Before I could react, a slap landed hard on my face. I turned to see Willow, expressionless, the first time she had ever laid a hand on me. Chapter 3. Makoto rubbed his knee and said, "Willow, don't misunderstand. George might just be in a bad mood today." Willow glared at me, visibly upset. "You're still defending him. He's always bullying others. I've really had enough." Willow bent down to help Makoto up. She shot me a cold look, her eyes filled with anger. "George, apologize." I remained silent. She shouted again, "You jerk, apologize." Makoto, assisted by her, subtly smirked at me, looking all too pleased with himself. My shoulder was bleeding. Blood trickled down my arm, forming 2 glaring lines. But it seemed Willow didn't even notice. Her gaze suggested I was a heinous villain. I couldn't help but laugh self-deprecatingly. I spread my hands and asked, "Why should I apologize?" Willow looked momentarily taken aback but quickly bit her lip, saying, "Why don't you apologize for bullying him?" I replied shamelessly, "Why would I bully others if I didn't bully him?" Willow's face flushed with anger as she scolded. You're truly shameless. If my parents knew you were this kind of person. I interrupted her, implying, your parents probably need to know. Makoto looked at me and quickly tried to soothe Willow. Let it go. Willow. How can I let it go? Willow instantly felt a surge of sympathy for him. She said, George, I've told you before, Makoto is different from others. No matter how you bully him, I won't break up with him. It'll only make me love him more and hate you more. With that, she helped Makoto turn and leave. I stood there, contemplating for a long while. The pain in my shoulder was sharp, but my heart felt oddly empty and light. I realized, at that moment, that all those so-called obsessions had turned to dust, completely vanished. They could do as they wished. It was none of my concern. Chapter 4. That night, Makoto posted 3 updates on his WeChat moments, all of which were screenshot and sent to me by some people in our circle with ulterior motives, especially Willow's reply, which was particularly highlighted. I knew they secretly wanted to see me humiliated. In the past, I might have let their interactions provoke me and sought out those thugs for a beating. Then she would immediately break up with them and come to me, saying she wouldn't act like that again, giving me the false impression that she actually cared about me. But this time, I ignored it. Instead, I dialed a number from 7 days ago. MS Zhao. This is George. I've thought about what you mentioned the other day. When I was 7, my parents died unexpectedly. Uncle Lu, who had a good relationship with my dad, took me in. Aunt Zhao was my mother's best friend from her youth. However, later, she eloped with her lover, and my mother supported her with some money to start a business in Harbor City. But by the time she established herself there, my parents were already gone. Aunt Zhao wanted me to live in Harbor City, as the business my mother had partnered with her was still managed by her, and now it was ready to be handed back to me. On the other hand, she hinted at wanting to fulfill the promise she made with my mother when they were young, wanting me to fulfill the betrothal agreement made between me and her daughter. 7 days ago, I hadn't agreed, not wanting to offend her, only saying I would consider it. But tonight, I had let go of all those years of obsession. My foolish behavior as a lovesick simp felt ridiculous. I didn't want to be the laughingstock of the circle anymore. It was better to start fresh elsewhere. 6 months ago, Willow insisted I go to school in Harbor City, even having a tantrum with Uncle Lu over it. But I had never agreed. Now, I felt it was a great opportunity. Perhaps it was fate's arrangement after all. On the other end of the line, Aunt Zhao was laughing joyfully, saying, George, your sister Anna is waiting for your approval. She can't wait to fly to Beijing to pick you up herself. I held the phone, feeling inexplicably shy. Even though I had promised to move to Harbor City, the next moment felt like my life was already being arranged for me. Yet, it didn't seem so bad. The sounds of laughter in my ears made me feel dazed. After 15 years of living together and 7 years of liking someone, it turned out that letting go completely only took a mere 7 days. Chapter 5. The day Willow and Makoto got engaged was deliberately chosen to coincide with my arrival in Harbor City. As a result, not many people came to see me off. When I got off the plane, I opened my phone and was flooded with messages, many of which were about Willow and Makoto's engagement. I chuckled and deleted those contacts, blocking them all. Before coming to Harbor City, I met with Anna. I didn't want any complications or to draw attention to ourselves. Anna agreed with my intentions. We exchanged rings and had a low-key engagement. Now, my account held an additional 100 million in profit sharing, and on our middle fingers, we wore simple rings. As I gathered my thoughts and prepared to head to Anna's house, my phone suddenly rang. It was Willow's cousin, Domingo. George, my sister's engagement ceremony is about to start. Where are you? I replied. I just arrived in Harbor City. He urged. You need to hurry back. You can still make it. I calmly asked. What for? Domingo hesitated before saying, George, are you really that thick-headed? If you don't come back to teach Makoto a lesson, my sister will really be someone else's. I was speechless. I asked, why should I go back to confront him? Isn't this a happy occasion for your sister? Domingo's voice rose in panic. George, are you out of your mind? Just as I was about to hang up, Makoto's voice came through the line. George, aren't you coming to my engagement ceremony with Willow? Willow considers you her brother, so that makes me your brother-in-law. I'd really like to have your blessing. It was a well-rehearsed duet, but it didn't mean much to me. I looked at Anna in the distance. She was leaning against the car, graceful and gentle. My heart felt completely at ease. I said, all right then. I wish you both a long and happy life together. Chapter 6. Willow wore a beautiful silk satin gown. Her hair was styled in a lovely braid, and her makeup was light. At that moment, she was enjoying matcha cake with a few close friends in the garden. However, every so often, she would glance over at Domingo and the others nearby. She knew they were likely informing George of her whereabouts. Just like countless times before, whenever there was a male presence around her, those people would immediately tell George. Then George would come running to cause trouble, even to the point of getting into a fight. She despised George's possessiveness and hated how men would fight over her, feeling as if they were objectifying her. But deep down, she understood that this very behavior allowed her to easily dismiss those men. This time, she figured George would likely come looking for trouble as well. That's why she had chosen the day I arrived in Harbor City for her engagement. Unfortunately, the auspicious time for the ceremony was set for 6 in the evening. Willow was feeling rather unhappy about that. After all, if George caught wind of it, he would immediately fly back, possibly arriving just in time for the ceremony to start. One of her friends remarked, "Willow, what if George comes back looking for you?" "Yeah, if you're engaged to someone else, I bet he'll be furious if he finds out," another friend added. "But it seems he's been unusually quiet lately. You and Makoto are all lovey-dovey, and he hasn't made a peep. If it were in the past, he would have stormed in already." Willow took a small forkful of cake but hesitated to eat it. Her mind was racing with her friend's last comments. George had indeed been unusually quiet, almost too calm, but based on her understanding of him, he wasn't the type to just let things go. Since childhood, she had rejected him numerous times, yet he always persisted, never backing down. Now, it seemed he had become much steadier. Suddenly, Willow had a thought. She smirked lightly and popped the tiny bite of cake into her mouth. "Just wait and see. He won't leave me that easily." One friend asked, "Willow, are you saying George will come back to cause trouble?" Willow didn't respond but felt a strong conviction inside her. George had always been a lovesick fool. No matter how capricious she was, he would always convince himself to tolerate her. He couldn't bear the thought of Willow getting hurt, more than he cared about his own pride. Willow knew that George was just retreating to advance. She was sure that by the time the engagement ceremony started, George would show up. Looking at the time on her phone, she said, "You all need to tell security to keep a close watch. Don't let any weird people in to cause trouble." Just as she finished speaking, she saw Domingo striding in confidently. "Cousin, it's George. He's here. The car is outside." Willow felt a sudden surge of excitement but quickly kept a cold expression. "I think he's just stubborn and won't let me go," Domingo replied. "Sister, what are you going to do? If he causes a scene, it'll be embarrassing for the Liu family." Willow scoffed and stood up, gracefully lifting her skirt as she walked outside. "I'll go see what he intends to do." Chapter 7. The group of friends followed Willow outside, but as soon as they left the garden, Makoto called out to her, "Willow." Makoto was dressed in a well-tailored deep blue suit with a simple silver-gray tie. The engagement ceremony was at 6 o'clock, still a few hours away. Makoto felt anxious inside, but he didn't show it. He asked, "Why did you come out?" Willow paused, her gaze falling on Makoto. He was gentle and refined, the kind of warm guy that girls easily fall for, quite the contrast to George's brashness. Because of his humble background, Makoto was somewhat timid, always speaking softly. During the time she was with Makoto, she was quite fed up with George and easily developed feelings for him. Moreover, her connection with Makoto began with a classic hero saving the damsel scenario. Many women harbor romantic fantasies of being saved by a hero, so her feelings for Makoto were quite different from the frivolities she experienced with her previous boyfriends. Makoto said tenderly, "I heard George is back. I just thought you might not want to continue with the engagement today. I can understand that." He smiled lightly, his gaze sincere as he looked into Willow's eyes. In relationships, many men struggle with expressing their feelings and emotions. Their delicate words often trigger resistance, and they sometimes forget what they intended to say, halting in awkwardness. But there are also men who, though not eloquent, convey their feelings through a look or a gesture, expressing deep emotion without needing to say the words. At that moment, Makoto's eyes clearly had that effect. Willow replied, "How could that be?" She shook her head vigorously and nestled into Makoto's embrace, saying, "Makoto, don't worry, I'll never leave him." Makoto nodded, holding Willow's shoulders and gently patting her. "Willow, I'm okay. Whatever choice you make, as long as it's what you truly want, I'll be happy for you." Although his eyes were slightly red, revealing his reluctance, his words comforted Willow. She playfully rubbed against his chest, wishing she could stay in Makoto's warm embrace forever. Domingo, with a gleeful smile, chimed in, "How could that be, Cheng? My sister doesn't like George at all. He's arrogant and aggressive. My sister is sick of him. How could she possibly want to go back to him?" Domingo also held a strong dislike for George. His reasons were rooted in a personal logic. He always saw himself as the sole heir of the Liu family, despite his uncle and aunt running the Liu group and Willow being their only daughter. Deep down, he fantasized that if George hadn't been adopted, he, as the only male descendant, would eventually inherit the family business. This fantasy floated lightly in his mind, lacking substance but not quite shameless. Perhaps if he reflected on it, he could differentiate between illusion and reality. Yet, this deep-rooted fantasy intensified his emotions. making him irrationally resentful towards George. Over the years, he took great pleasure in seeing George humiliated. Now that George had been sent to Harbor City, hardly anyone had come to see him off. In fact, his belongings had been packed and sent ahead 2 weeks prior, as if the family was eager to get rid of him. Domingo felt quite satisfied at the moment. As long as it wasn't George, he would support whoever became his brother-in-law. Chapter 8. Willow suddenly looked at Domingo with confusion. "Aren't you usually on good terms with George?" Domingo sneered. "How could I be on good terms with him? I despise George more than anyone." Now that the dust had settled, he felt no need to pretend. He had once feigned brotherhood with George, but now that he didn't have to, he felt refreshingly free. Thus, he didn't notice the unusual expression on Willow's face. Still talking to himself, he said, "Sister, why don't you stay with your fiancé? I'll go deal with George. Don't worry, I'll make sure he gets humiliated." Willow asked, "What do you want to do?" He replied, "I'll find some bodyguards to beat him up and throw him out the door if he dares to crash someone else's engagement. His parents have no face to show." Willow suddenly raised her hand. The sharp sound of a slap echoed, leaving everyone stunned, especially Makoto. He furrowed his brows. Sensing trouble, he saw Willow's eyes welling up with tears. Domingo glared, shouting, "Sister, what does this mean?" Willow said calmly, "George is still my nominal brother." Her face was pale with unspoken emotion. "You call him brother but secretly think of humiliating him. You really disgust me." Domingo, gritting his teeth, retorted, "What do you mean I disgust you? What are you acting for? You clearly hate him the most. Everyone can see through your thoughts. Why are you suddenly playing the saint?" Willow stood there, silent for a long time. Did she really hate George as much as they said? Yet, when George first came to the Liu family, they had the best relationship. She would obediently follow her brother, sharing her favorite candies with him. She would cling to him for stories, telling everyone he was her favorite. When she fell and got hurt, it was George who comforted her and carried her home. When she was bullied at school, George was the first to rush to her aid. Even the first time she got her period, it was he who bought her sanitary pads. George had always cared for her, and she used to depend on him so much. She had liked being close to George from the very beginning. When did that change? Willow felt a sudden confusion within. Makoto's sigh snapped her back to reality. That's right. It must have been George who changed first. He became more arrogant as he grew up, coddled by the Liu family, with an increasingly overbearing nature. He had strong possessiveness and dominance, forbidding her from dating other men and often flying into a rage. That's why she grew to hate him more and more, distancing herself from him. It had to be that way. So she wanted the Liu family to send him away, to put him as far from her as possible, to Harbor City. She only wanted George to respect her and understand her need for freedom. Once he realized that, she would naturally seek him out. With so many years of connection between them, how could she really bear to be so far apart? Chapter 9. But now it seemed that George was still stubborn. On such a joyous day, he continued to ruin her happiness. He was truly despicable. As soon as he arrived, he turned the Liu family into chaos and sowed discord between the siblings. It was easy to understand this mentality. It was far easier to blame others than to admit one's own mistakes. Instead of reflecting on his actions, it was safer for him to stick to his established path. Willow had clearly given George hints more than once, even sabotaging his relationships, but at this moment, she was blaming him for not allowing her to date others, completely forgetting her own actions. She had slapped her own brother, yet blamed George for the turmoil in the Liu family. By ignoring and forgetting her own detrimental behaviors, she created a causal chain that made her feel utterly justified, as if she were always on the right path. Willow thought she had figured it all out, yet tears flowed uncontrollably. She felt a sense of unease but instinctively blamed George, tightly clutching Makoto as she choked out, "I'm sorry, Makoto. I've been blaming George on such a good day. I have to make it clear to him. I won't let him ruin our engagement." Makoto wiped Willow's tears and let go, standing quietly as he watched her retreating figure. He was troubled. Domingo's earlier questioning made a lot of sense. Everyone knew that Willow hated George the most, but because of just a few of Domingo's words, she had slapped her own cousin. Did she really hate George? Or perhaps, deep down, she saw George as different from anyone else. Chapter 10. When Willow reached the entrance, she did not see George. However, his Honda Accord was parked quietly nearby. Standing next to the car was his best friend, David. Willow's steps halted abruptly, her heart feeling as if it had dropped. At that moment, she remembered that George had given this car to David before leaving Beijing. As David approached her, he held out a red envelope. His expression was neutral as he straightforwardly said, "George asked me to give you and Makoto this red envelope." Willow didn't reach out to take it. David frowned. "There's also something else." "What is it?" "George left in a hurry and hasn't had the chance to see you. He called you a few times, but you didn't answer, so he hasn't been able to get it back from you. Remember that antique jade bracelet he gave you for your birthday? That was a token from his father to his mother. David smirked slightly, saying, George said this bracelet is meant for his future wife. Now that it's with you, it feels quite inappropriate. Miss Lou, could you give me the bracelet? I'll bring it to George when I visit him in Harbor City. Willow suddenly looked down, her gaze falling on the jade bracelet on her wrist. That morning, she had inexplicably chosen to wear it while getting ready, even though it didn't quite match her dress, but she hadn't changed it. Now, looking at the bracelet, it felt glaring, meant for a future wife. The thought of George possibly marrying another girl, someone who would share a bed with him, stirred discomfort in her heart. George liked her so much. How could he marry someone else? Now, instead of coming himself, he sent David to demand the bracelet. It was nothing but a ploy to manipulate her. How infuriating. Indeed, Willow was disturbed by his actions. Chapter 11. Seeing that she hadn't replied for a while, David called out, Miss Lou. Willow lifted her head and said dismissively, You tell George, there's no way to take back a gift once it's given. Of course, if he insists, then let him come and ask me himself. After saying this, Willow turned to leave. David stopped her, gritting his teeth. Miss Lou, wait a moment. I'll have George speak to you personally. He thought to himself, what a joke. George was getting married. How could such a meaningful jade bracelet stay with another woman? George had repeatedly emphasized the importance of retrieving it before his wedding. He wanted to personally put it on his wife's wrist that day. David had long found Willow insufferable, but George was blind and foolish, getting strung along for so long and then tossed aside. Just thinking about it made David want to punch Willow, but now he had finally come to terms with it. George had found such a great wife. He was genuinely happy for his friend and was determined to fulfill his mission. Chapter 12. When I received David's call, the car was almost at Anna's house. I asked, David, what's up? He replied, George, I went to get the bracelet from Willow like you said, but she won't give it to me. She said if you really want it, you should talk to her yourself. I instinctively glanced at Anna beside me, feeling inexplicably guilty. I wasn't very familiar with her yet, even though her makeup looked sweet and bright, instantly likable with peach blush and dewy light pink lip gloss. Her clear, bright eyes and composed demeanor gave off a certain distance. Even sitting in the car, she maintained a graceful posture, and her occasional smile radiated poise. That natural air of a rich girl made me feel a bit uneasy. Before I could speak to David, Willow's voice came through on the line. George, do you want the bracelet, or are you just trying to make me look bad? I was momentarily stunned and let out a laugh in frustration. She continued, if you're trying to disrupt my engagement with Makoto, then I suggest you don't waste your effort. If you want the bracelet back, then you should take it back just like you gave it to me. After all, something so valuable, I won't just hand it back through someone else. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my tone calm. David is my best friend. You can just give it to him. I'll bear all the consequences myself. Willow sneered. George, how much clearer can I be? You should take it back the same way you gave it to me. Then she hung up. I felt a surge of anger. How did I give her that bracelet? It was on my 20th birthday. Willow and I were both drunk. She secretly pulled me into her room, saying she had a gift for me. The next moment, she tiptoed and kissed me. I pushed her against the door and deepened the kiss. In the end, she patted my shoulder, and I finally restrained myself. Before leaving, I asked her to wait, went back to get the bracelet, and put it on her wrist. I told her its significance. She said nothing but shyly accepted it. Because of that, I thought she had tacitly accepted my feelings. These past few years felt like a terrible dream. Now that I was awake, I just wanted to completely sever ties with the past. I thought Willow would be eager to return it, like throwing away trash, but I never expected her to say that. It was then that I realized, youthful folly must one day come with a price. If that bracelet hadn't held such meaning, I wouldn't have cared about getting it back. But now that I was getting married, leaving the bracelet with Willow would be unfair to Anna. Chapter 13. What happened? Anna's gentle voice suddenly broke in. I instinctively looked up, our eyes meeting. I didn't want to hide anything, but because we were still getting to know each other, I found it hard to speak. I ultimately shook my head and said, nothing. I calculated that, at worst, I could ask Uncle Lou for help. If that didn't work, I wouldn't mind taking some firm measures. I just had to get it back. With that determination, I gradually relaxed. Really nothing. Just a small matter with Uncle Lou's family. I put on a light-hearted expression and smiled at Anna. I'll handle it. Anna didn't press further. She just nodded lightly and said, George, I trust you, but I'm your future wife. So if you encounter difficulties, you must tell me. I'll share the burden with you. Hearing future wife made my neck heat up. I was already engaged. In half a month, Anna would be my wife. Bittersweet feelings swirled inside me. but amidst it all, I felt a glimmer of hope. I smiled at her and gently nodded. The car arrived at Anna's house. I got out first and then turned to help her. I noticed the engagement ring on her finger. Since she put it on that day, she hadn't taken it off. As I helped her out of the car, she didn't let go of my hand. Instead, she squeezed it tightly. At first, I felt a bit awkward, but her soft, warm hand suddenly brought me immense calm. It felt like this was how it should be. From a distance, Aunt Zhao saw us holding hands and smiled appreciatively. Before we could get close, Aunt Zhao quickly came over and hugged me, tears welling in her eyes. "George, seeing you reminds me of your mother. It's been so long since I saw her." I felt a surge of emotions. It was a distant memory, but her scent overlapped with the faint recollection of my mother. Anna stood beside us, quickly teasing, "Auntie, you're making George feel smothered." Aunt Zhao had married Anna's father at 40. She never had children of her own but treated these non-blood related kids as her own. Anna had always respected her. I had long known this, so I had never understood why Anna agreed to this verbal marriage agreement. After all, it had nothing to do with her, but Aunt Zhao assured me that one day I would understand. So I didn't ask further. Aunt Zhao smiled, released me, and wiped her tears. "George, come home with me." I instinctively looked at Anna. She was watching me too. Behind us, the greenery was lush and vibrant. When I looked over, Anna's eyes sparkled with warmth. She reached out her hand to me. "George, let's go home." Chapter 14. With 20 minutes to go until 6 o'clock, Makoto had finished his pre-ceremony preparations, but Willow had yet to come out of the makeup room upstairs. After a moment of hesitation, Makoto walked over. The makeup room door was unlocked. Faint voices drifted out. A woman's voice said, "Willow, is George really not coming back?" Another replied, "If he was going to, he would have by now. Even a rocket couldn't get him here on time." The first voice continued, "Willow, I've actually been wanting to ask you for a long time. Do you really have no feelings for George at all? You grew up together. He's always taken care of and protected you. He's always had eyes only for you." Makoto paused, instinctively furrowing his brow. There was a long silence before Willow's voice finally spoke up. "I have no feelings." "Would you have feelings for a simp?" Willow scoffed in a feigned contempt, but she remembered George was only a few months older than her, always treating her like an older brother, caring for and protecting her, making sure she never got bullied during her school years. She recalled the night of George's birthday when she had kissed him, believing it must have been the alcohol that made her dizzy. She had also accepted the bracelet he gave her. The first voice chimed in again. "Such a handsome simp. I definitely have feelings for that." Another voice echoed, "Yeah, several of my friends have their eyes on him. Remember last year's horse racing event?" The first voice replied, "Of course. He wore a black rider's jacket and won the championship. I still remember how he stood on the podium, took off his hat, and smiled confidently. It was so charming." Willow remembered, too. She recalled that day when George, during his speech, said he wanted to dedicate his victory to a special someone in his heart. He had been so happy, showering her with attention, boasting about his medal and pony. He talked so much that when Willow ignored him, he teased her about the beautiful lady presenting the awards. At that moment, Willow had glared at him, and only when he said that he had eyes only for her, that Anna had just caught a glimpse, did she feel relieved. A smile finally tugging at her lips. Both she and George loved horseback riding. George's pony was still being raised at Lou's family ranch. The next moment, Makoto suddenly pushed the door open, interrupting Willow's thoughts. "Willow," he said, wearing a deep blue single-breasted suit, a replica of Lou's original engagement suit. Lou had come from humble beginnings, and the story of him rescuing a beauty to spark a beautiful romance was still fondly recalled by many today. Willow's greatest pride in life was her parents' deep love for each other. Perhaps that was why, when Makoto had saved her, she developed special feelings for him. Now, standing before her, Makoto resembled her father in those old photos, gentle and steady. Willow's heart was once again enveloped by that sense of fate. Many believed in destiny, either as a mere coincidence or as prophesied by the stars. That feeling was so strong that even if emotions were lacking, it could be filled with the thrill brought by destiny. So even though she had never considered taking the step of engagement and marriage with Makoto, today, she suddenly felt it was right to complete this engagement ceremony with him. Makoto smiled at her and reached out his hand. Willow stood up, lifting her skirt to walk over to him. "I was worried because you didn't come downstairs for so long," Makoto said. Willow replied, "It's fine now. Let's go." Makoto asked, "Is everything okay with George?" Willow's gaze flickered to the bracelet on her wrist. "George is arrogant and self-righteous. He should just stay in Hong Kong forever. I never want to see him again." Makoto felt a sudden thrill of joy inside him, but he maintained a worried expression. "Isn't that a bit harsh? After all, he's..." Willow interrupted, "It doesn't matter who he is. I just don't want to see him again." Willow gently linked her arm with Makoto's. Makoto said nothing more and led Willow downstairs. It was 6 o'clock. His engagement ceremony was about to begin. From this day forward, Makoto would no longer live a life of poverty. He would no longer have to live in a mixed neighborhood or share a small room with his 2 younger brothers. His family would rise with him. Willow was the only opportunity fate had bestowed upon him to transcend social classes. He would hold onto her tightly and never let her go. Chapter 15. Anna and I set our wedding date for half a month later. Time was tight. Yet, Anna's family had already been preparing for our wedding many years ago. So even though we were busy, things were progressing smoothly. Aunt Zhao told me that Anna had fallen seriously ill when she was young. After she recovered, her father took her to worship a Buddha, saying she must marry in September of her 25th year to ensure a long and healthy life. Anna's family took these beliefs seriously. When Aunt Zhao first mentioned this marriage over the phone, she calculated my birth date. It turned out that Anna and I were a perfect match in terms of destiny. So when I agreed to the engagement, the entire family was overjoyed. I received many precious gifts. The most meaningful one was an antique brooch left by Anna's mother. When Anna handed it to me, I felt guilty. The most appropriate return gift would be the pair of bracelets my father had given my mother, but they were still with Willow. Perhaps seeing my gloomy mood, Anna took me to the garden for a walk. "George, are you unhappy?" she asked. Her eyes filled with concern. My gaze fell on the shiny blue brooch on my chest. Even if I had no knowledge of antiques, I knew it was invaluable. Since childhood, I couldn't stand it when others treated me well. For every bit of kindness shown to me, I felt I had to repay it 10-fold, 100-fold. I mentally calculated the gifts I could give to Anna, but every option felt insufficient. I was already feeling guilty, and encountering Anna's gentle gaze ignited a surge of anger within me. Years of obliviousness had turned me into a complete fool. I suddenly laughed, yet tears pricked my eyes amidst the laughter. Anna looked at me, panicked. She hurriedly pulled out a handkerchief from her pocket to wipe the moisture from my eyes. I waved my hand, casually wiping my eyes and replying, "It's not that I'm unhappy. It's just that I suddenly realized how foolish the past was." She paused for a moment and seriously replied, "No, George, no matter what you've been through or what others say about you, I think you're amazing. As long as you take things seriously, you'll succeed in anything." Her sincere praise nearly made me lose myself. I laughed and said, "Anna, you're making me feel embarrassed. Who can withstand such flattery?" She suddenly blushed and whispered, "I've only ever praised you." I asked, "Haven't you ever had a boyfriend?" She answered, "Does kindergarten count?" I was taken aback and asked, "Haven't you dated anyone after growing up?" She looked down and shook her head in silence. I pressed on, "Have you ever liked someone?" Anna hesitated for a few seconds before finally saying, "Yes, but unfortunately, he didn't like me back." A faint understanding began to dawn on me. So that was it. Perhaps Miss Anna had a crush on someone who loved someone else, which led her to agree to this engagement in despair. For some reason, an uncomfortable feeling surged in my heart, but I quickly comforted myself. Maybe it was better this way. At least I wouldn't feel too guilty. When I left that day, Anna had said to me, "George, I hope you can see me as your future wife from the heart. I know you tend to keep many things to yourself, but if you could occasionally share or talk to me about some of them, it would make me very happy." I felt that my heart had indeed begun to open up slightly. I nodded and said, "Anna, I will." I gave Anna a pink diamond ring as a gift. It wasn't particularly expensive, but it was a design I had sketched myself on a whim. This gift felt pure, as I hadn't designed it for Willow. I had simply been thinking of my parents, translating my longing into every line of the pencil strokes. Chapter 16. The wedding preparations were in full swing. But we had not announced it publicly. I didn't want to be ostentatious, especially since my affairs with Willow were still unresolved. When I left, Willow had probably already decided never to see me again. So all my belongings were packed and sent to Port City. This included all the little gifts she had given me over the years, like the box of paper cranes she folded for me as a child, the candy wrappers from the chocolates she gave me on Valentine's Day in high school, and the tie she gifted me on my first day at work. Among these, there was one special gift, a set of rings she secretly bought during college. They weren't valuable, but I cherished them like treasures, because a gift like a ring carries an extra layer of meaning for a girl. Seeing it made me tolerate all her bad moods. But now, I had slowly come to understand, when someone never liked you, even if you have a marriage certificate, it's as if it doesn't exist at all, let alone these material things. As I sorted through Willow's gifts one by one, my heart felt strangely calm, without a ripple of emotion. By the end, the box was empty, and my heart felt lighter than ever before. As I was preparing to send the package, my phone suddenly buzzed with several WeChat messages. It was from the staff at the horse ranch. My little horse was sick, refusing to eat grass and hay. Seeing the photo, I was frantic. The staff said the little horse must miss me. Since I usually visited every few days, but this time, I hadn't gone on schedule. I hurriedly called to inquire. On the other end, they said, "Mr. George, Miss Lou is also here. Let her talk to you." I was taken aback, and Willow's voice came through clearly. "George, didn't you forget your promise when we raised this little horse? How can you be so irresponsible?" Of course, I hadn't forgotten. The children in the Lou family all have their own pets. But the only requirement is that you must take full responsibility for the pet you choose and care for it well. You must never abandon it halfway, I said. "Isn't it you who asked Uncle Lou to arrange my trip to Port City?" Willow replied. "George, why do you always make excuses? If you really cared about the little horse, you wouldn't have left it. You would refuse your dad's arrangements and not go to Port City. In short, you don't really care about your little horse." In that moment, Willow's heart skipped a beat. It seemed she suddenly heard her own underlying message. George, he actually didn't care much about her either. Otherwise, he wouldn't have really gone to Port City. He wouldn't be indifferent upon learning of her engagement. He wouldn't have missed the engagement ceremony. He wouldn't be taking back the jade bracelet he gifted her. Chapter 17. Willow, I'm not in the mood to scold you, so I advise you not to stir up trouble. I'll make time to go back and see it. If possible, I also plan to bring it to Port City. Willow's voice trembled, tinged with frustration as she said, "Are you planning to never return to Beijing?" I just smiled and said, "Why not?" Yes, I was going to rebuild my family in Port City, so my focus on life and work would naturally shift here, but there was no need to tell Willow any of this. Willow coldly said, "George, you always have to be so clever with your words. How immature can you be? You better not regret it." "George," I was speechless and asked. "Regret what?" She replied. "I'm engaged to Makoto now." I asked. "What of it?" She said, "The wedding date is being finalized." I responded. "And then?" She said. "George, don't tell me you don't understand. If I really marry Makoto, you," I laughed, feeling relieved and pleased, and said, "Sis, it's a good thing for you to get married. Do you want me to give you a big red envelope?" On the other end of the line, Willow suddenly fell silent, and I didn't wait for her to say anything else. I just hung up. When we were 16, we had our first crush, and from then on, things spiraled out of control. She wouldn't let me call her sister, and she refused to call me brother. Now, after all these years, we had finally returned to the most appropriate position. I had no interest in hating her or blaming her. After so many years of companionship, giving a red envelope was only right. Chapter 18. I called Uncle Lou. After greeting him and Aunt Lou, I delicately brought up the matter of the bracelet. I said, "Uncle Lou, I was young and foolish a couple of years ago, causing quite a few misunderstandings. Now that I think about it, I always feel regret and shame. Since my sister is engaged now, I think it's best not to cause any unnecessary misunderstandings." Uncle Lou sighed on the phone. He said, "George, I've always liked you and regarded you as my own son. I've actually always wanted you to be our family's son-in-law. Your aunt has been shedding tears talking about you these past few days. I understood their sadness. I felt difficult too, but that sadness was only because of the sincere love from the two elders. So I said, Uncle, feelings cannot be forced. You can't make a sweet melon grow from a bitter vine." He said, "Willow is too willful. She just," I interrupted. "It's nothing, Uncle. If my sister likes someone, she should marry whoever she wants." He paused for a moment and said, "I will help you get that bracelet back. In a few days, your aunt and I will go to Port City for a wedding. I'll personally give you the bracelet then." I thanked him and hung up the phone. The staff handling the shipping had also arrived. The carefully packed gift box was loaded onto the truck. In a few days, it would be safely delivered to Willow. Soon, Uncle Lou and the others would come to Port City. When the jade bracelet was returned to me, the absurdity of those youthful days would come to a complete end. From then on, Willow and George would have nothing to do with each other. Chapter 19. After Willow got engaged, she started meeting up with her friends more frequently. When she went to the bathroom, she overheard David talking on the phone. David said, "Bro, I'm heading to Port City tomorrow. We agreed you'd have your wife introduce me to a bridesmaid." "What? Your wife found 7 bridesmaids?" "George, oh George, the fate has been cruel for too long. If you don't mind, I'd be willing to call you father." Willow stood in the long, empty hallway, David's excited voice still echoing in her ears, but in the end, only that name, George, remained. She thought she might be drunk. Otherwise, how could she hear such absurd jokes? Yes, she was really drunk. That was why she was hearing things. Or perhaps, she just missed George. And that was why she misheard someone else's name as George's. Willow leaned against the wall, staggering over. She called out, "David." David, who had just finished his call, was startled and asked, Willow. Willow demanded. Who were you just talking to? She stared into David's eyes and said, I heard you say you were going to Port City for a wedding, and I heard George's name. Her usually stunning face now revealed a hint of distortion. And those eyes that usually sparkled were now filled with unshed tears. She forced a smile, but it was cold and desperate. She said, Don't tell me you're going to attend George's wedding. At first, David didn't understand, but the next moment, he realized. What a twist of fate. Over the years, David had been so anxious because of George. Now, he felt so pleased inside. The proud daughter of the Liu family was experiencing this today. Wasn't she the one who loved to keep others dangling? Wasn't she the one who enjoyed watching those who liked her suffer? She would have countless opportunities to feel that way in the future, but David wouldn't tell her the truth. George had forbidden him to speak, so he wouldn't let Willow know. Running to Port City to stir trouble, that was his best friend's most important day of his life. He absolutely couldn't let that scheming girl ruin it. He sneered and said, You misheard. I'm indeed going to Port City for a wedding. I'm going with George because it's one of our former classmates getting married. Willow seemed to not believe him and said, I've never heard George has any close classmates in Port City. David smirked and said, Willow, do you really know George? You only enjoy the process of being adored. So his identity, life, and thoughts are irrelevant. So what nonsense are you spouting now? George is my buddy, one of the people I admire most in my life. I'll tell you, I'm cheering for your breakup with him. You're not worthy of his affection for so many years. After David said that, he turned and left, and Willow watched his disappearing figure. Her heart suddenly pained, but she didn't know why she felt this way. She just felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to see George, even if it was just for a moment. But the next day, Willow received a large box of express delivery from Port City. The reason it arrived so quickly was that Anna had specially arranged for a private jet to deliver it to Beijing. At that time, I was completely focused on arranging the wedding venue and had no idea about any of this. Chapter 20. As Willow opened those boxes, her body inexplicably trembled. The things inside felt unfamiliar at first, but gradually, a flood of memories surged forth like a tidal wave. The first couple bracelet she gave George, he didn't like the style, thought it was too childish, but still wore it dutifully. The little stars she gave him, the stickers she gave him, and colorful little gems, filling an entire box. At the end, there was the set of matching rings. Willow held that small box tightly. Suddenly, her vision blurred. A voice rang in her ears, saying, Willow, you're practically George's shadow now. When do you plan to marry him? Back then, the kids often teased her and George like that. At 20, she was young, playful, and headstrong, with so many boys chasing her, but she dismissed them all, because with handsome and cheerful George by her side, she linked arms with him, making countless friends envious. She was happy because this wonderful George liked only her. At that time, she wanted to marry him, to be exact. She had known for a long time that she would marry him someday, so she gave him that small token, that cheap set of rings. But when did she start to tire of George? And when did fate defeat her childhood companion? Was it that she truly felt nothing for him? Or was it simply because she was certain he would never leave her? Willow clutched the rings tightly. Suddenly, absurdly, tears fell. Chapter 21. At that time, I was busy with the final rehearsal before the wedding. I naturally had no idea. Willow saw the gifts from the past decade, especially the reaction to the ring I treasured, and during the rehearsal, when I kissed Anna for the first time, I also didn't know that Willow would slap Makoto hard because of that ring. How ridiculous. That day, when Makoto mocked me, set me up, and forced me to strike him, none of us expected such a day would come, but Willow and Makoto. They had already become unimportant people in my life. I didn't care at all. Chapter 22. When Uncle Lou brought the jade bracelet to me, I also told my parents the good news about my upcoming wedding. They were both surprised, because the wedding they came to Hong Kong for was Anna's. They never expected that the mysteriously elusive groom, who had never been photographed by the media, would be me. They were happy for me, but also tearful with regret, especially Aunt Lou. She held my hand tightly, refusing to let go. She said, George, I don't want to cry on your big day, but I'm really unwilling. It's my fault. I didn't raise my daughter well, so that she took one wrong step after another. Willow wanted to break up with Makoto, but Makoto was adamant about not letting her go. Makoto's entire family came to the Lou's home to cause a scene. They even threatened to stay and not leave. After all, they had nothing to lose, while the two of them were causing a ruckus. Willow just found out she was pregnant. Their marriage was probably going to be finalized. I gently hugged Aunt Lou back, feeling my eyes slightly wet. Thinking back to when I first went to the Lou's, I cried every night looking for my parents, Aunt Lou comforting me. Scene after scene, I remembered those carefree days. The times they treated me like their own son. I hoarsely said, "Uncle and Aunt, it's not your fault." In the end, she wiped away her tears and said, "Child, it's Willow who isn't blessed. Aunt sees Anna as a very good girl. You will definitely be happy together." Chapter 23. I know that a woman as gentle, caring, and understanding as Anna, even if she doesn't love me, our married life would still be happy and harmonious. But I never expected that happiness would be far more intense than I imagined. When I placed the jade bracelet on Anna's wrist, she showed me a photo. In the photo, I was holding a trophy, smiling confidently toward the audience, and Anna was standing beside me, smiling at me. That year at the horse racing festival, when I won the championship, it was Anna who presented the award and put the medal around my neck. But at that time, my heart and mind were entirely on Willow. I only glanced at her briefly. I only knew that she was an incredibly beautiful woman. Who would have thought there would be such a fate afterward? I smiled, like a child, pointing at the photo of us two. But I couldn't say a word. Anna hugged me from behind and said, "Do you remember I told you I once had someone I liked?" She touched the jade bracelet, her cheek lightly brushing against my back as she said, "George," I told myself, "when I receive that bracelet, that's when I will tell you, the person I love is you." Chapter 24. In college, I particularly loved browsing Big Orange's tweets. There was a phrase often used to cover up scenes, called crazy flipping the pan. At that time, I didn't quite understand what it meant. Until the wedding night. When the bride shed her daytime modesty, I turned into a chef. I cooked this dish with great energy, stir-frying and searing, a vigorous cooking session. I was tireless, eager to whip up a grand banquet. But the next day, I was exhausted, sleeping until noon. While I was still sound asleep, Anna had already refreshed herself with a morning run, breakfast, swimming, bathing, and so on. Days after the wedding, the housekeeper smilingly told me, "Sir, you have no idea how much Miss Anna smiled that day. In all the years I've been at Anna's home, it was the first time I saw her talk so much in the morning. She greeted everyone, even my little grandson. I think Miss was eager to carry around a loudspeaker to tell the whole world that she got married and loves her husband." I couldn't help but laugh, making an excuse to send the housekeeper away, and sat alone in the garden reading the news. From a distance, I saw Anna's car driving in. She got out of the car. Immediately looking for me, I shouted, "Anna." I waved at her with a smile from the garden. My little horse had been sent to Hong Kong the day before. It was secretly arranged by Anna. It had been well taken care of on the way, with no signs of discomfort. When I saw it, it was happily circling around Anna. Seeing Anna smile, I smiled too. I pushed through the lush greenery to walk towards her, and as I walked towards her, she had already run to my side. I stopped, opened my arms. As she leaped into my embrace, I held her tightly. Extra Chapter 1. Willow only learned about it on George's wedding day. At first, she couldn't believe it at all. She even naively thought that the so-called wedding was just a play directed by George himself. Just like her engagement to Makoto, it didn't hold any real significance. But when her friend sent her photos from George's wedding, and she saw George in a tailored groom's suit standing next to his bride, when she saw her parents sitting in the VIP seats, when she saw David flirting with the bridesmaids next to George, when the handsome groom kissed his bride, when the bride shed tears of happiness, Willow suddenly heard a deafening crash as something inside her collapsed. She felt a bit dazed, and it seemed she couldn't hear what her friends were saying at all. All that echoed in her ears was that one sentence: "George is married. George is someone else's husband now." But didn't George always like her since they were kids? Didn't George always hope Willow would marry him? Wasn't he in love with her? On her 20th birthday, he personally put the most meaningful jade bracelet on her wrist. They had made a promise, and if Willow had no feelings for him at all, how could she have let George chase away one male friend after another? To be fair, she had been using George all along. Back then, she was a playful girl. As a wealthy young lady, she always had many suitors around her. She loved watching those men fight over her. She adored the classic Western novels and fantasized about being a noblewoman, watching her lover duel for her. But she also knew clearly that she was just playing and would never really date any of those men. George said she had 4 boyfriends, but they all broke up after he had a talk with them. But he didn't know that she had never actually dated those boys. After a few flirty days, she had had enough of the game. But how could she, being so noble, play the villain? So her childhood friend became the best tool. She deliberately encouraged George. George had a fierce temper. The moment he heard that any man was no good and was bullying Willow, after Domingo or others fanned the flames, he would rush over to teach those foolish boys a lesson. And she, of course, would act heartbroken, forced to break up by her brother. But deep down, she secretly delighted in it. She seemed to particularly enjoy seeing George angry for her. She liked watching him act as her most devoted knight, driving away the bothersome suitors. He was domineering yet somewhat sad, but George would always forgive her. As long as she acted cute, said something sweet, accompanied him to do what he wanted, and gave him some affection, he would immediately cheer up. She thought this time would be the same. She thought no matter how big her mistake was, George would forgive her. George had lost his parents and had come to the Liu family since he was young. Where else could he go? Everyone assumed they would definitely get married in the future, even if Willow was too willful and got engaged to Makoto. But now, George was marrying someone else. He had a wife, someone beside him. Willow could no longer stand by George's side. Extra Chapter 2. On the day George and his wife returned to the capital, Willow had just had a big fight with Makoto. She had moved out of their shared apartment, determined to cut ties with Makoto completely, when a friend sent her a video from the hotel corridor. She suddenly realized that her relationship with Makoto had been calculated from the very beginning. The seemingly gentle and kind man was actually so despicable. She couldn't bear to recall the scenes from that day. Couldn't bear to think about how disappointed George must have felt. She wished she could go back to that day and strangle that pathetic version of herself. She had been with George for 15 years. Why had she acted so crazily to humiliate him? It was from that moment that she completely lost George. She had completely lost him. So now, when George walked into the living room holding his wife's hand, she saw the antique jade bracelet on his wife's wrist at a glance. A sharp pain pierced her heart all at once. The kind of overwhelming pain that was inescapable, but she managed to maintain her composure, silently following her parents behind, watching his happiness. That day, Willow didn't say a single word. She didn't even dare to look at George more than once. Her hands, resting on her knees, had clenched tightly, almost piercing her palm, yet she seemed to feel no pain at all. She felt somewhat impressed with herself. How could she maintain a calm smile throughout? It wasn't until George was about to leave that she realized her face was starting to freeze. When George was leaving, he called out to her. He called her sister, just like when he first came to their home. Willow heard it clearly and understood it well. George truly had no feelings for her anymore. The last thing George said to her that day was, "Sister, I hope you can find your own happiness in the future." She nodded. But inside, it was pouring rain. She couldn't do it, but she couldn't tell him. Extra Chapter 3. After breaking up with Makoto, the entire Liu family was embroiled in a shameful scandal. Willow discovered she was pregnant, but she absolutely didn't want the child, nor did she want to be with Makoto again. She couldn't accept that her future husband would be the father of her child, especially since he had been plotting against her since the first meeting. The so-called heroic rescue, the replay of parental love, were all lies, just lies. Makoto was simply using her as a stepping stone to make a fortune. She didn't want this child, but Makoto was blocking her. He even brought his parents over. Willow had never encountered such shameless, lowly people. They were relentless, throwing tantrums and using every trick in the book. The Liu family was a cultured family. Her parents couldn't afford to lose face like this. She couldn't even call the police. Overwhelmed, Mr. Liu and Mrs. Liu could only pay them off to leave. But those people tasted blood and were even less willing to let go. They were like leeches, like vampires, like maggots, like a nightmare that would never end. Willow was exhausted by the chaos caused by Makoto's family, and her belly was growing larger. She finally decided to tear off the shameful facade herself. When the police came to the Liu family and chased those ruffians away, Makoto seemed to realize he had no chance left. But still, he extorted a large sum of money with his leverage. On the day of the confrontation, Willow felt like she was meeting Makoto for the first time. He was cold, petty, greedy, twisted, and delightfully ugly. When Mr. Liu handed the money to Makoto, Willow suddenly wanted to laugh at herself. She laughed at her foolishness, her naivety, everything she had once taken for granted as a girl. The daily companionship of youth faded away and lost its freshness. But a true woman would love a man who would do everything to protect her, to encourage and support his struggles, and she was undoubtedly a complete disgrace. Later, George's wife took his pony away. When Willow went to the stable, the pony had already been taken away. Only her horse was left. Standing all alone in the stable, Willow let it out. She mounted the horse and raced into the wind, going round and round, tireless, until finally, she closed her eyes in the wind and loosened the reins. She didn't die, but she lost half her life. Her parents cried heartbreakingly by her bed. At that moment, Willow seemed to finally grow up. She endured the pain, comforting her parents, thinking to herself that her future life could not continue in such an absurd way. Shortly after Makoto returned, he was sentenced to prison for extortion. Also imprisoned were the father and half-brother who had caused the most trouble. The people from Anna's family quickly dispersed like a tide. They had received some money before, Although they weren't satisfied, it was better than nothing. Returning to their hometown with the money, they no longer cared about Makoto's fate. Only Makoto's stepmother was crying her eyes out over her son's imprisonment. Hating Makoto, these old stories from afar in the capital, faded like ink on an old scroll, and George's new life was gradually unfolding like a fresh canvas.